the grand corridors of Valdoria Palace, where centuries of royal blood had walked before, a single whispered conversation would bring down walls that had stood for generations. What started as an ordinary Tuesday morning would become the day that shook the very foundation of the monarchy, when a trusted guard's conscience collided with a queen's desperate secrets, and a crown prince discovered that the greatest threat to his kingdom came not from enemies abroad, but from the shadows within his own family. The truth, they say, has a way of surfacing when you least expect it, and for the royal house of Valdoria, that truth was about to emerge from the most unlikely source, setting in motion events that would test loyalties, destroy reputations, and force a family to confront the price of keeping secrets in a world where every whisper could become tomorrow's headlines. The morning mist clung to the ancient stone walls of Valdoria Palace like a shroud, as if nature itself sensed the storm brewing within the corridors of power. Queen Isabella Valdoria stood at her private study window, her fingers trembling slightly as she held a cup of tea that had long since grown cold. At 52, she had weathered many storms during her 15 years as queen, but nothing had prepared her for the conversation she'd had 3 days ago. A conversation that now threatened to unravel everything she had worked to build. Captain Marcus Thorne had served the royal family for 12 years, his loyalty never questioned, his discretion absolute. The son of a palace groundskeeper, he had risen through the ranks of the royal guard through merit alone, earning the trust of 3 generations of Valdorian royalty. His weathered face bore the marks of a man who had seen conflict, who understood the weight of responsibility, and who had never once betrayed the confidence placed in him. Until now. The Queen's morning routine had been interrupted by an urgent request from Captain Thorne for a private audience. In her study, surrounded by portraits of her predecessors and the weight of royal tradition, she had expected to discuss security arrangements for the upcoming state visit. Instead, she found herself face to face with a man whose conscience had finally overcome his oath of silence. "Your Majesty," Captain Thorne had begun, his voice steady but his eyes betraying the internal struggle he had endured for months. "There is something I can no longer keep to myself, something that affects not just your personal reputation, but the stability of the crown itself." The Queen had felt her heart sink even before he continued. She knew, with the instinct that comes from years of navigating political minefields, that whatever he was about to reveal would change everything. Captain Thorne had discovered the secret during a routine security sweep of the palace's private quarters. Hidden correspondence, clandestine meetings, financial transactions that bypassed official channels, all pointing to a truth that would devastate the carefully maintained image of royal propriety. The Queen had been conducting an affair, but worse than the personal betrayal was the identity of her partner and the implications of their relationship for national security. Lord Adrian Castellanos, the Queen's secret lover, was not merely a diplomatic attaché from neighboring Meridia, as his official credentials claimed. Intelligence reports that Captain Thorne had access to through his security clearance revealed him to be a sophisticated operative whose real purpose in Valdoria involved gathering sensitive information about the kingdom's military capabilities and economic policies. The affair had been carefully orchestrated, a classic honey trap that the Queen had walked into with devastating naivety. The implications were staggering. For months, Queen Isabella had unknowingly provided classified information to a foreign agent during their intimate encounters. State secrets whispered in moments of passion, military strategies discussed over private dinners, economic policies revealed in pillow talk, all flowing directly to Meridia's intelligence service. The security breach was comprehensive and devastating, compromising not just Valdoria's national interests but also those of their allies. Captain Thorne had spent sleepless nights wrestling with his duty. His oath of service demanded loyalty to the crown, but that same oath required him to protect the kingdom from all threats, including those that came from within. The Queen's actions, whether born of loneliness, manipulation, or genuine feeling, had placed the entire nation at risk. The conversation had lasted 2 hours, with Queen Isabella initially denying the allegations, then attempting to minimize their significance, and finally breaking down as the full scope of her betrayal became clear. She had been lonely, she explained through tears, isolated by the demands of her position and the increasing distance from her husband, King Robert, whose own battles with depression and alcohol had left their marriage a hollow shell maintained only for public consumption. Lord Castellanos had seemed like salvation, charming, attentive, genuinely interested in her thoughts and opinions rather than just her royal status. He had pursued her with the patience and skill of a professional, creating opportunities for private conversation, offering emotional support during difficult periods, and gradually building the intimate relationship that would serve his true purposes. Captain Thorne had presented evidence meticulously gathered over several weeks once he became suspicious. Photographs of the Queen and Castellanos in compromising situations, recordings of their conversations that revealed state secrets being disclosed, financial records showing expensive gifts being exchanged,
And most damning of all, intelligence intercepts proving that information from their conversations had been transmitted to Meridian operatives within hours of their private meetings. The security implications extended far beyond the immediate threat.
If news of the affair and the intelligence breach became public, it would trigger a constitutional crisis. The opposition party would certainly call for the Queen's abdication, possibly even criminal charges.
The kingdom's allies would question Valdoria's reliability as a partner, potentially isolating the nation diplomatically. The monarchy itself, already facing declining public support, might not survive the scandal.
Queen Isabella had begged Captain Thorne to remain silent, promising to end the affair immediately and ensure that no further classified information would be compromised. She offered him promotions, financial incentives, even a position in the diplomatic service, anything to secure his continued discretion.
But the captain had already made his decision. "Your Majesty," he had said with respectful firmness, "this matter is beyond my authority to handle quietly.
The security breach requires investigation by the proper authorities. Prince William must be informed immediately."
The mention of her stepson's name had caused the Queen to pale visibly. Prince William, heir to the throne and increasingly influential in government affairs, maintained an already strained relationship with his stepmother. He had never fully accepted her marriage to his father, viewing her as an outsider who had disrupted the traditional order of succession. If he learned of her betrayal, he would show no mercy in pursuing justice, regardless of the personal cost to the family. Captain Thorne had given the Queen 48 hours to confess the situation to Prince William herself, or he would feel obligated to make a formal report through security channels. The ultimatum had sent Isabella into a spiral of panic and desperate planning. She had considered fleeing the country, faking illness to buy time, even attempting to discredit Captain Thorne before he could reveal what he knew. But each option seemed to lead only to greater disaster.
Now, 3 days after that devastating conversation, Queen Isabella stood at her window watching the morning activities in the palace courtyard below, knowing that her time had run out. Captain Thorne would arrive at Prince William's office within the hour to make his report.
The careful facade she had maintained for months was about to crumble, taking with it not just her personal reputation but potentially the stability of the entire royal family. The irony was not lost on her that the very security measures designed to protect the royal family had been the instrument of her exposure.
Captain Thorne's diligent monitoring of potential threats had revealed the greatest threat of all, her own weakness and betrayal. The man whose loyalty she had never questioned was about to destroy everything she held dear. Not out of malice, but out of the same unwavering dedication to duty that had made him trustworthy in the first place. As she prepared to face the consequences of her actions, Queen Isabella reflected on the choices that had brought her to this moment, the loneliness that had made her vulnerable, the marriage that had become a political convenience rather than a partnership, the kingdom that had never fully embraced her as their queen.
Lord Castellanos had exploited every one of these weaknesses with professional precision, leaving her not just personally devastated, but facing the destruction of everything she had worked to achieve.
The sound of footsteps in the corridor outside her study told her that the moment of reckoning had arrived. Prince William's voice, calm but commanding, could be heard giving instructions to his security detail.
Captain Thorne's deeper tones responded with military precision.
In moments, they would be at her door, and the secret that had consumed her thoughts for months would finally be revealed.
Queen Isabella set down her cold tea and straightened her shoulders, drawing upon years of royal training to maintain her composure even as her world prepared to collapse around her. The woman who had once dreamed of being remembered as a queen who brought positive change to Valdoria was about to become known instead as the queen whose betrayal nearly destroyed the monarchy itself. Second Chronicle, The Prince's Fury Unleashed. The heavy oak door to Prince William's private office closed with a resonating thud that seemed to echo through the entire east wing of the palace. Captain Marcus Thorne stood at attention before the prince's mahogany desk, his weathered hands clasped behind his back, his expression grave with the weight of the revelation he was about to deliver. Prince William Valdoria, 34 years old and bearing the unmistakable bearing of royal authority, studied the captain's face with the sharp intelligence that had made him both respected and feared within the corridors of power. "Captain Thorne," Prince William began, his voice carrying the measured tone that those who knew him recognized as a warning sign of barely contained emotion, "Your message indicated a matter of extreme urgency regarding national security. I assume this concerns more than routine palace protocols." The prince had been reviewing diplomatic correspondence when the captain's request for an immediate private audience had arrived. As heir to the throne and chairman of the National Security Council, William was accustomed to dealing with sensitive matters, but something in the captain's demeanor suggested this was far beyond the usual scope of palace security concerns. Captain Thorne took a deep breath, knowing that the next few minutes would irrevocably alter the dynamics within the royal family and potentially the future of the kingdom itself.
Your Highness, what I am about to reveal will be deeply disturbing and will require immediate action to prevent a national security crisis of unprecedented proportions. For the next 45 minutes, Captain Thorne methodically presented his evidence, watching as Prince William's expression transformed from professional attention to barely suppressed fury. The photographs, audio recordings, intelligence intercepts, and financial records painted a devastating picture of betrayal that struck at the very heart of the monarchy's credibility and the nation's security. Prince William's reaction was immediate and explosive.
That presentes a prudent programme. This is a basic.
The careful control that had been drilled into him since childhood shattered as the full implications of his stepmother's actions became clear. He rose from his chair with such force that it toppled backward, his hands clenching into fists as he struggled to contain the rage that threatened to overwhelm his rational judgment.
That woman, he said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper that seemed more threatening than any shout, has not only betrayed my father and disgraced the crown, but she has potentially compromised every classified operation this kingdom has undertaken in the past year. Do you understand what this means, Captain? Prince William began pacing behind his desk, his mind racing through the immediate implications and the longer-term consequences of Queen Isabella's actions. Every state dinner she had attended, every security briefing she had access to, every private conversation with foreign dignitaries, all potentially compromised by her relationship with Lord Castellanos. The damage assessment alone would take months, and the intelligence failures could have consequences that would echo for years.
Captain Thorne remained at attention, understanding that the prince needed to process the full scope of the crisis before they could begin planning their response. He had served under Prince William's direct command during the border conflicts with Estonia 5 years earlier and had witnessed firsthand the prince's ability to maintain clarity under extreme pressure.
But this was different. This was personal betrayal combined with national catastrophe. How long have you known about this? Prince William demanded, stopping his pacing to fix Captain Thorne with an intense stare that seemed to pierce straight through him.
I became suspicious approximately 6 weeks ago, Your Highness. I spent the following month gathering evidence and verifying intelligence reports before I felt confident enough to approach Her Majesty directly.
That conversation took place 3 days ago. The prince's jaw tightened visibly.
You spoke to her first?
Before coming to me? Captain Thorne had anticipated this question and prepared his response carefully.
Your Highness, my oath of service requires me to provide the royal family with the opportunity to address serious matters internally before involving external authorities.
I believed it was appropriate to give Her Majesty the chance to explain her actions and end the security breach voluntarily. And what was her response? The captain's expression grew even more grave. She denied the allegations initially, then attempted to minimize their significance. When presented with conclusive evidence, she begged me to remain silent and offered various incentives to secure my discretion. She promised to end the relationship with Lord Castellanos immediately, but she showed no understanding of the permanent damage already done to our national security. Prince William's hands gripped the edge of his desk so tightly that his knuckles turned white. The betrayal was complete. Not only had Isabella compromised state secrets, but she had attempted to corrupt one of the few people in the palace whose integrity was absolute. The insult to Captain Thorne's honor was almost as offensive as the original security breach. "Where is Lord Castellanos now?" the prince asked, his tone indicating that immediate action was required. "According to our surveillance, he remains in his diplomatic quarters at the Meridian Embassy compound. Our intelligence contacts believe he is preparing to leave the country within the next 48 hours, presumably to avoid any investigation that might result from exposure of his activities." Prince William moved to the secure communications panel built into his office wall and began entering codes that would connect him directly to the kingdom's intelligence services. The time for family discretion had passed. This had become a matter requiring the full resources of the state security apparatus. "Director Morrison?" Prince William's voice carried absolute authority as the head of Valdorian intelligence answered the encrypted line. "I need an immediate security alert implemented. We have a confirmed intelligence breach at the highest levels of government. Lord Adrian Castellanos of the Meridian diplomatic mission is to be placed under immediate surveillance and prevented from leaving the country until further notice." The conversation that followed involved classified protocols that Captain Thorne was not cleared to hear, so the prince indicated with a gesture that the captain should step into the adjacent secure conference room. Through the soundproof glass, Thorne could see Prince William's animated conversation with intelligence officials, his gestures becoming more emphatic as he outlined the scope of the crisis and the required response. 20 minutes later, Prince William opened the conference room door, his expression having shifted from rage to the cold determination that had made him effective in both military and political contexts. Captain Thorne, I need you to understand that everything we have discussed today falls under the highest classification of state security.
The investigation that begins immediately will be comprehensive and ruthless. No one, regardless of their position or relationship to the crown, will be exempt from scrutiny.
The implications were clear. Queen Isabella would face the full consequences of her actions, with no consideration given to her royal status or her marriage to the king. Prince William's loyalty to the crown superseded any personal relationships, and he had made the decision to treat his stepmother as he would any other person who had betrayed the kingdom's trust. "Your Highness," Captain Thorne said carefully, "what are your instructions regarding Her Majesty's immediate status?"
She remains unaware that I have made this report, and her behavior suggests she may attempt to flee or destroy evidence if she becomes aware of the investigation. Prince William's smile was cold and without humor. Queen Isabella will be informed of the investigation by me personally, in the presence of security officials and legal counsel. She will be given the opportunity to cooperate fully, or face the more severe consequences of continued deception.
As for flight risk, Director Morrison is implementing protocols as we speak to ensure that no member of the royal household can leave the country without explicit permission from the Security Council. The prince moved to his office window looking out over the palace grounds where tourists and staff continued their normal activities, unaware that the institution they served or visited was facing its gravest crisis in living memory.
The investigation would need to be handled with extraordinary care to prevent public panic, while ensuring that every aspect of the security breach was thoroughly examined. Captain, your role in this investigation will be crucial. Your evidence forms the foundation of our case, and your testimony will be required at every level of the proceedings. I want you to understand that you have performed your duty with exceptional courage and integrity.
The kingdom owes you a debt that can never be fully repaid. Captain Thorne felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders like a heavy cloak. The investigation would consume months of his life, subject him to intense scrutiny from multiple agencies, and forever change his relationship with the royal family he had served with dedication. But looking at Prince William's determined expression, he knew that the alternative, allowing the security breach to continue, would have been far worse. As the prince began outlining the immediate steps of the investigation, Captain Thorne realized that his simple act of conscience had set in motion events that would reshape the monarchy itself. Queen Isabella's betrayal had created a crisis, but Prince William's response would determine whether the kingdom emerged stronger or found itself permanently weakened by the scandal that was about to engulf them all.
Third Chronicle, the investigation begins. The secure conference room in the basement of Buckingham Palace had been hastily converted into a command center, its ancient stone walls now lined with modern surveillance equipment, secure communication systems, and evidence boards that would have looked more at home in a military intelligence facility than in a royal residence. Director James Morrison of Valdorian Intelligence sat at the head of an oval table surrounded by his most trusted operatives, while Prince William occupied the chair typically reserved for the monarch during national security briefings. 48 hours had passed since Captain Thorne's revelation, and the investigation had expanded into a comprehensive operation involving multiple agencies and departments.
The initial fury that had consumed Prince William had crystallized into methodical determination to uncover every aspect of the security breach and ensure that such a catastrophe could never happen again. "Gentlemen," Director Morrison began, spreading aerial photographs of the Meridian Embassy compound across the polished table surface. "Lord Castellanos attempted to leave the country yesterday evening aboard a private aircraft. Our airport security detained him under the National Security Act, and he is currently being held in the diplomatic detention facility pending formal charges." Prince William leaned forward, studying the photographs with the tactical awareness he had developed during his military service.
"What has he revealed during questioning?" Agent Sarah Fletcher, the intelligence services specialist in counter-espionage, consulted her encrypted tablet before responding. Initially, he maintained his cover story and demanded diplomatic immunity. However, when presented with evidence of his intelligence activities, he began cooperating in exchange for consideration regarding potential criminal charges.
The evidence against Lord Castellanos was overwhelming. Digital forensics experts had recovered encrypted communications equipment from his embassy quarters, along with detailed dossiers on key members of the royal family and government officials. Most damaging were the recordings of his conversations with Queen Isabella, professionally edited to highlight the most sensitive intelligence disclosures and prepared for transmission to his handlers in Meridia. Captain Thorne sat quietly in the corner of the room, his presence required as the investigation's primary witness, but his role largely observational as the professional intelligence operatives took control of the expanding inquiry. The weight of his decision to report the Queen's actions had grown heavier as the full scope of the operation became clear. The technical analysis of Castellanos' equipment reveals a sophisticated intelligence operation that has been active for over 18 months, Agent Fletcher continued. The initial approach to Her Majesty was carefully planned and executed as part of a broader Meridian strategy to compromise multiple European monarchies simultaneously. Prince William's expression darkened as the implications sank in. Are you telling me that Isabella was not the only target? That this is part of a coordinated intelligence campaign against allied nations? Director Morrison nodded grimly. Our preliminary intelligence sharing with allied services suggests similar operations targeting the royal families of Belgium, Norway, and the Netherlands.
In each case, attractive intelligence operatives have cultivated intimate relationships with vulnerable members of royal households, gaining access to classified information through emotional manipulation. The revelation transformed the crisis from a personal scandal into an international security threat requiring coordination with multiple allied intelligence services.
Prince William authorized immediate contact with NATO intelligence coordination offices in the European Security Council, knowing that Valdoria's humiliation would need to be shared in order to prevent similar breaches in allied nations. The investigation of Queen Isabella herself had progressed with clinical thoroughness. Financial analysts had traced unusual expenditures and gifts that coincided with her relationship with Castellanos, while communications experts had recovered deleted messages and emails that provided a detailed timeline of the developing affair. Most disturbingly, psychological profiles suggested that the Queen had been completely unaware of the intelligence operation, genuinely believing that her relationship with Castellanos was based on mutual attraction and emotional connection.
Dr. Margaret Hartwell, the palace's chief psychologist and an expert in intelligence manipulation techniques, had been brought in to evaluate the Queen's mental state and assess her culpability in the security breach. Her preliminary findings painted a picture of a lonely, vulnerable woman who had been expertly manipulated by a skilled intelligence operative. Your Highness, Doctor. Hartwell addressed Prince William directly. While Her Majesty's actions constitute a serious breach of security protocols, the evidence suggests she was the victim of a sophisticated psychological operation designed specifically to exploit her emotional vulnerabilities. Castellanos invested over a year in building trust and intimacy before beginning to extract sensitive information. Prince William's jaw tightened as he processed this information. The revelation that his stepmother had been manipulated rather than willfully treacherous complicated his emotional response to her betrayal. But it did not diminish the severity of the security breach or the need for consequences.
Doctor, I appreciate your professional assessment, but the Queen's emotional state does not change the fact that state secrets were disclosed to a foreign agent. The damage to our national security remains the same regardless of her intentions or awareness.
The prince had already made the difficult decision to confront Queen Isabella directly, despite the personal and political complications involved. The conversation would need to be recorded for legal purposes and conducted in the presence of security officials, transforming a family matter into a formal interrogation that would permanently damage their already strained relationship.
Agent Fletcher had spent the morning preparing for that confrontation by analyzing every aspect of the Queen's relationship with Castellanos, creating a comprehensive timeline of meetings, communications, and intelligence disclosures that would be presented as evidence of the security breach. The documentation was thorough enough to support criminal charges if the decision was made to pursue legal action against the Queen.
The challenge we face, Director Morrison explained to the assembled team, is balancing the need for justice and security with the potential consequences of public exposure. If this scandal becomes public knowledge, it will trigger a constitutional crisis that could destabilize the monarchy itself.
Prince William had been wrestling with this dilemma since the investigation began. His duty to the crown demanded that security breaches be punished regardless of the perpetrator's identity, but his responsibility as heir to the throne required him to consider the long-term stability of the institution he would one day lead.
The legal team had outlined several possible approaches.
Queen Isabella could be quietly forced to abdicate her royal titles and leave the country permanently, avoiding public scandal but potentially setting a precedent for future security breaches. Alternatively, she could face formal criminal charges for treason and espionage, sending a clear message about consequences but risking the monarchy's public reputation.
A third option involved using the scandal as leverage to force broader reforms within the royal household, implementing security protocols and oversight mechanisms that would prevent similar breaches in the future. This approach would require the Queen's cooperation and absolute discretion from all parties involved. Captain Thorne had observed the discussions with growing unease, realizing that his simple act of reporting suspicious behavior had evolved into a complex political and legal crisis requiring decisions far beyond his authority or expertise. The investigation had taken on a life of its own, involving dozens of intelligence operatives, government officials, and legal experts who were now determining the fate of the royal family.
Captain. Prince William addressed him directly for the first time since the briefing began. I want you to understand that your actions have potentially saved this kingdom.
from a security catastrophe that could have continued for years. Whatever decisions are made regarding Queen Isabella's fate, your integrity and courage have protected the crown and the nation.
The validation was meaningful, but Captain Thorne understood that the investigation was far from over. Queen Isabella would need to be confronted with the evidence. Lord Castellanos would need to be processed through the legal system. And the broader implications of the Meridian intelligence operation would require ongoing international cooperation to address fully.
As the meeting concluded and the various operatives dispersed to continue their specialized investigations, Prince William remained in the secure conference room, staring at the evidence boards that documented his stepmother's betrayal in methodical detail. The personal pain of the family crisis was competing with his duty as future king, and the decisions he made in the coming days would define both his character and his fitness to rule.
The investigation had revealed the depth of Queen Isabella's betrayal, but it had also exposed weaknesses in the royal security apparatus that had allowed such a breach to occur. Prince William's response to both failures would determine whether the monarchy emerged from this crisis stronger and more secure, or permanently weakened by the revelation of its vulnerabilities.
Fourth Chronicle, Consequences and Revelations. The throne room of Valdoria Palace had witnessed many momentous occasions throughout its 800-year history, but never had its ancient walls contained a scene as devastating as the one unfolding on this gray autumn morning. Queen Isabella sat rigidly in a chair facing Prince William, her royal composure barely masking the terror that had consumed her since being summoned for what she knew would be her final confrontation as a member of the royal family.
The formal setting had been carefully chosen by Prince William to emphasize the gravity of the situation and the official nature of the proceedings. Director Morrison stood to one side with two senior intelligence officials, while a court stenographer recorded every word for the permanent legal record.
Captain Thorne, whose revelation had triggered this crisis, maintained his position near the chamber doors, serving as both witness and symbolic reminder of the duty that had brought them to this moment.
Isabella, Prince William began, his use of her given name rather than her royal title, immediately establishing the new dynamic between them. You understand why you have been summoned here today. The investigation into your relationship with Lord Adrian Castellanos has uncovered evidence of security breaches so severe that they constitute treason against the crown and the kingdom. Queen Isabella's hands trembled slightly as she clasped them in her lap, but her voice remained steady when she responded. William, I want you to understand that I never intended to harm this kingdom or betray your father's trust.
Adrian made me feel valued and appreciated in ways that I had forgotten were possible. I was lonely and vulnerable, and I made terrible mistakes in judgment.
The prince's expression remained impassive as Director Morrison stepped forward to present the evidence that had been meticulously compiled over the past week. Photographs, audio recordings, intelligence intercepts, and communication logs painted a comprehensive picture of systematic espionage that had compromised Valdoria's national security for over a year.
The evidence shows, Director Morrison stated with professional detachment, that sensitive information regarding military capabilities, diplomatic strategies, and economic policies were disclosed during your private meetings with Lord Castellanos. This intelligence was immediately transmitted to Meridian operatives and has potentially compromised ongoing operations involving multiple allied nations.
As each piece of evidence was presented, Queen Isabella's composure cracked further. The recordings of her own voice disclosing classified information were particularly devastating, as they removed any possibility of claiming that the intelligence breaches had been accidental or minimal.
The professional editing and enhancement of the recordings demonstrated the systematic nature of the espionage operation. Lord Castellanos has confessed to his role as a Meridian intelligence operative, Prince William continued, his voice carrying the weight of absolute judgment.
He has provided detailed information about the operation targeting you, including the psychological profiling that was used to identify your vulnerabilities and the specific techniques employed to gain your trust and extract classified information. The revelation that her relationship with Castellanos had been entirely fabricated as part of an intelligence operation struck Isabella with devastating force.
Every moment of intimacy, every expression of care and affection, every promise of genuine connection had been carefully orchestrated deception designed to exploit her emotional needs for strategic advantage. Dr. Hartwell stepped forward to present her psychological assessment, her clinical observations offering some context for the Queen's vulnerability to manipulation while not excusing the consequences of her actions. Her Majesty was targeted specifically because intelligence profiling identified her as isolated within the royal family, emotionally neglected in her marriage, and seeking validation outside official channels. These vulnerabilities were systematically exploited through a sophisticated seduction operation. Prince William absorbed this information with visible struggle, his anger at Isabella's betrayal competing with recognition that she had been the victim of expert manipulation.
The complexity of the situation required balancing justice with compassion, punishment with understanding of the circumstances that had made the security breach possible. The question before us now, the prince stated with finality, is how to address this crisis in a manner that serves both justice and the long-term interests of the crown. Isabella, you have 3 options, and the choice you make will determine not only your future but the future stability of this monarchy. The first option presented was immediate abdication of all royal titles and permanent exile from Valdoria, with the understanding that public disclosure of the security breach would be avoided to protect the monarchy's reputation. This approach would allow the royal family to present Isabella's departure as voluntary retirement from public life, avoiding the constitutional crisis that would result from public knowledge of the espionage scandal. The second option involved formal criminal charges for treason and espionage, with Isabella facing trial and potential imprisonment. This approach would satisfy the demands of justice and send a clear message about consequences for security breaches, but would inevitably become public knowledge and trigger the constitutional crisis that all parties sought to avoid. The third option was the most complex, involving Isabella's cooperation with ongoing counterintelligence operations to help identify and neutralize similar threats to allied monarchies. This approach would require her to maintain her royal status temporarily while serving as an intelligence asset, using her experience as a target to help protect other potential victims. Queen Isabella listened to each option with growing despair, understanding that none of them offered her any possibility of maintaining the life she had built as Queen of Valdoria. The choices before her represented different degrees of personal destruction, with the only variable being the extent to which her downfall would damage the monarchy itself. "I need time to consider these options," Isabella said quietly, her voice barely audible in the vast throne room. "This decision will affect not only my life but the lives of everyone who has served with me and supported the crown during my years as queen." Prince William's response was immediate and uncompromising. "You have until tomorrow morning to make your decision. The security implications of this crisis require immediate resolution, and we cannot allow uncertainty about your status to continue while ongoing investigations proceed." The 24-hour deadline reflected the urgency of the broader security situation, as intelligence services across Europe were working to identify and neutralize similar operations targeting other royal families. Valdoria's cooperation in this effort was crucial, but it required clarity about Isabella's future role and the extent to which her experience could be utilized in counterintelligence operations. As the formal proceedings concluded, Captain Thorne reflected on the chain of events that had brought them to this moment. His decision to report suspicious behavior had exposed not just a personal scandal but an international intelligence operation that threatened the security of multiple allied nations. The investigation had revealed the vulnerability of traditional institutions to modern espionage techniques and the devastating consequences when personal weakness met professional manipulation. Queen Isabella was escorted from the throne room under discreet security supervision, her royal status temporarily maintained while she considered options that would determine the rest of her life. The woman who had once dreamed of being remembered as a transformative queen now faced the reality of being remembered as the monarch whose betrayal had nearly destroyed the institution she had sworn to serve. Prince William remained in the throne room long after the others had departed, staring at the throne that would one day be his and contemplating the lessons this crisis had taught about leadership. The investigation had revealed not only the scope of the security breach, but also the systemic weaknesses that had made it possible, requiring comprehensive reforms to prevent similar catastrophes in the future. The following morning, Queen Isabella submitted her formal abdication letter, choosing exile over prosecution, and ending her 15-year tenure as Queen of Valdoria. Her departure was announced as voluntary retirement from public life, with no mention of the espionage scandal that had forced her decision. The monarchy survived the crisis, but the scars of betrayal would influence its policies and procedures for generations to come. Captain Marcus Thorne was quietly promoted to Director of Royal Security, his integrity and courage during the crisis earning him the trust and respect of Prince William and the broader royal household. His decision to prioritize duty over personal loyalty had saved the kingdom from a security catastrophe and established new standards for accountability within the palace walls. The investigation's conclusion marked not an ending but a transformation. As the royal family emerged from the crisis with stronger security protocols, clearer lines of accountability, and a deeper understanding of the threats facing traditional institutions in an age of sophisticated espionage and psychological manipulation. The price of that knowledge had been devastating, but the lessons learned would protect future generations of royals from similar betrayals. In the shadows of the palace, where secrets had once flourished unchecked, new systems of oversight and protection ensured that no future queen or king would face the devastating choice between personal happiness and national security that had destroyed Isabella's reign and forever changed the House of Valdoria.